Hello everyone, Ross here at Teacher Toolkit. Our good friends Ofsted, they just can't go away. I thought I would take a look at the new report cards, given that they're all starting to be published. And what I want to do here is signpost a blog that I've written, referencing particularly teaching and learning in the new report cards and what school leaders might want to consider going forward. People familiar with my views on Ofsted, it's not a rant here. What I've tried to do is a simple linguistic analysis of phrases that inspectors are using under curriculum and teaching, and then pose some practical problems that this might create for teachers working in our schools and how we might approach this going forward. So give me a moment. I'm still quite new to broadcasting here on YouTube. I'm just going to bring up some where we've got a strong standard, but interestingly, all the others are in that area. So the expected standard, this one here, where all the others are strong standards. So expected standards, the weakest link for curriculum teaching in this school. And then we have a strong standard example. So I'm going to just spend, and forgive me, 10 minutes just going through some of these. You've got a link here at the start, which just opens a page. Let me just show you that here on my tab. So what I've done here, if I just put all these back to normal default settings, obviously education training, I've filtered to secondary. I'm looking at the latest reports, and we've got 22 published here, and they'll be published every other month for people that are familiar with all this. So what I've done is sampled a few and gone through each of those and grab the screenshot here and what I suggest might be the issue from a distance and some potential fixes. So I share this with some caution. So you people know that I'm not Ofsted's biggest fan, but I definitely support the need for school inspection. As ever, we know the problem's reliability. Judging teaching and learning in a short window is really hard for everybody, never mind a visitor. And then schools can make big policy decisions based on a few lines of text that from these inspection reports. So I've analyzed these recent ones, and I'll walk you through them. So let's look at this one first of all. Let me just double check. I'm working on two screens here. Let's see if I can zoom this in. There we go. That might be a bit better for everybody watching. And so this one here, it says, although some teachers deliver subject content clearly, others lack confidence in adapting their teaching activities to address misconceptions. Furthermore, in some subjects, teachers do not use assessment strategies to check pupil understanding. Now, we all know inspectors can't see every school, and we're talking here about a large secondary school. They're not going to see every lesson, and they'll triangulate sources, talk to students, those kind of things. But I guess the issue we've got here is I'd recommend here that school leaders work hard to develop a secure overview of their students, so getting their teachers to understand student data, starting points, endpoints, develop a range of question strategies. How many different techniques do you know? Which can be underpinned by this lens that we call adaptive teaching. And when these techniques are embedded as habits and routines, teachers can build confidence to systematically check. It's habitual, and checking people's understanding every lesson becomes a daily habit. So my recommendation in this context, with this single line for improvement that needs attention, is if we can develop a secure overview, it can help develop better understanding of their needs, strengthen adaptive teaching, and in particular inclusion. And schools can do this by automating those question habits and checking for understanding systematically would be my recommendation there. So let's look at the next report here. It says, at other times, teachers do not check carefully that pupils understand previous learning. And again, at a distance, if you're seeing students in secondary schools, the worst case, you see your students once a week. The best case, you might see your students 3, 4, 5 times a week out of 25 possible lessons. It should be bread and butter that teachers check what students can remember and retrieve and those kind of things. And I get it, work's busy. And I also get that inspectors won't necessarily see these key moments in lessons, and then we end up with lots of these statements in our reports. And what happens is it becomes a big policy decision in this school in particular. So the other headache here is, it's a needs attention report, and I'd recommend here in this case maybe a variety of retrieval practice methods. So underneath this image, there's 50 different techniques, links to research, links to resources that can help if you think your school's in this situation where we're not systematically checking for understanding. And when schools help their teachers develop this secure understanding of how learning happens, it can be transformative. Okay, now here's the next one. Unexpected standard. We've got a green traffic light. Isn't that exciting? All these different colored boxes. So we're meeting an expected standard. Of course, we want to push on one step further. So what we've got here is leaders provide staff with evidence-based research on teaching and subject content. When you look at all CPD needs across the entire system, the working life of teachers report published every year by the DfE, subject specific CPD is the greatest need for teachers, followed by SEND. So SEND should always be on your agenda, but specific subject content, that's a real difficulty when you've got lots of teachers teaching different subjects and you have your inset agenda to work through. However, in this case, this is a good report. And when you look at high performing schools and research from DfE and Education Endowment Foundation and those kind of things, schools that are evidence informed tend to get better outcomes. So what I'm suggesting here in this case, how can this school kick on even further? So I'd recommend here that school leaders consider how teachers can start conducting their own research trials while teaching full time. It's all fine and dandy, school leaders filtering research down, but what about from the ground up? So what you need to put in place here to achieve this is, how can observations be used to improve collective efficacy, appraisal, pupil outcomes? What systems and logistics do you need to put in place to embed these habits for all teachers, so all teachers have the confidence to share things that they're researching, particularly as part of their performance management, rather than those bog standard target setting from top down, so outdated. So school leaders can fix this. This is a great place to be, but how could you kick on even further? Well, from my experiences working with hundreds of schools across England, these higher performing schools are more evidence informed than others. School leaders implementing, for example, some of the latest thinking, informative assessment, adaptive teaching, and those kind of things. These help sustain that research culture, but it's teacher filtered up, not school leader filtered down. So that'd be my recommendation in this Ofsted report. Here's another one, another expected standard. And this one says here, sometimes the questions teachers ask do not always help pupils extend their thinking. Again, inspectors seeing a snapshot, triangulating different sources. So here we've got one sentence that could become your teaching and learning policy procedures for the next academic year. And it goes on to say here, teaching does not always help pupils connect individual pieces of knowledge. So we could look at curriculum and precise details. So when you look at the linguistic language between different reports, there's a difference in precision and highly effective and those kind of things. So that last sentence there that highlighted, it makes it more difficult for pupils to learn key topics in greater depth. So what I recommend in this case is that build that confidence again in systematically checking for understanding, curriculum sequencing, precise detail so that lessons can be highly effective. And when teachers build a repertoire of adaptive teaching techniques, questioning, feedback, non-verbal gestures, moving around the room, and all those kind of things, these techniques can be automated to support this practice, this knowledge acquisition, and importantly, reduce teacher workload. So that would be my recommendation there. But again, let me remind you, this is a green button here, an expected standard. Okay, now you'll have to go into different reports if you're interested and see how it all mixes up. And it's very early days for the profession. I'm broadcasting this here Thursday, 5th of February. So still early days. Okay, let's look at the next. We've got another expected standard here. This one says teachers in most subjects know exactly what knowledge pupils need to master and remember. And there's lots of other things in here, but that's a good statement to have. If I was the leader in this school, I'd be really pleased with some of the comments here. So developing expertise, I recommend when you read through the full details here, developing that engine room at middle leadership, especially in quality assurance processes across departments and in evaluation area in other areas across the school, building that confidence so that it's not just school leaders that know what's happening across the school, but the middle leadership team too. And a perfect remedy for this, for building evaluation expertise, supporting teachers particularly, is improving observation, work scrutiny, deep dives, pupil voice, those kind of things. So some good things in here, but as it mentions quite rightly, in many schools, there's some few things kind of work in progress. Here is another one. Now, this one says, where I've highlighted, leaders have a secure understanding of the quality of the curriculum and how well it's taught. Fantastic. They provide staff with help to deliver the curriculum effectively. Linguistically, listen, effectively. Staff are particularly skilled, again, another key word, at adapting learning for the needs, for the range of needs pupils have. So another great report here, expected standards. Okay, what's not to like, and how could we kick on and maybe get to that strong standard and then maybe that kind of top level. So I haven't got any of those to share with you here, and I think it's very too early days for the profession. But in this case, working to improve support for teachers in SEND, which I mentioned earlier, especially teachers working with pupils with who might be on a education healthcare plan. And when you study the Department for Education and analytics for teacher workload, that SEND issue again remains one of the greatest CPD priorities for teachers outside of developing subject expertise. So although that's a glowing report, when we're thinking about inclusion and all students, raising attainment and things like that, again, understanding cognition, understanding how stress changes the way you teach, how the way you learn, especially for vulnerable students, knowing how we process information here, I think unlocks a greater depth of curriculum knowledge. So that's what I'd recommend here. And again, you can read these reports and make your own assumptions, but I thought I'd just start by sharing mine. Now, here's another one. Now, let me see, I'm losing track. Number 7 we're on here. I've got a couple more to go. So this one says here, leaders have a secure understanding of the quality of the curriculum and how well it's taught. Great. We'd expect that at a basic level. They provide staff with help to deliver the curriculum effectively. Staff are particularly skilled at adapting learning to the range of pupils they have. Again, what's not to like here? A really good glowing report. We've got a good, solid, expected standard here. And I'm not cross-referencing these to others. I know school leaders and head teachers will do these things. So I'm just looking at curriculum and teaching here. So just looking at this surface level, I'd recommend here school leaders consider work again to improve the inclusion, attainment of your most vulnerable students, which we should all be doing. Okay, now let's look at this one. Again, an expected standard. Now look carefully. All other areas of school life have a strong standard. So here, curriculum and teaching is the weakest link. So what does it say? It says there is some variability in how staff implement leaders' teaching and learning strategies, for example, checking for understanding and question. Now, I have a lot of beef with this. For last 10 years, barking on about consistency and chasing that elusive that everyone does the same thing. There's some merit in wanting to have everyone row the boat the same and students to have the same exposure to non-negotiables or teaching and learning methods across the school. It is desirable, but you're never, ever going to get 100% consistency in any school. Even if you have to get rid of 1 or 2 teachers who might not toe the line in some of those very strict schools where they want teachers to do things in a certain way. There is some merit in that to a degree. However, I believe instead of consistency, the word coherence. If I join the school, this is how we do it here, translate it for maths, translate it for PE, adapt it for year 7 and 11, and allow your teachers to be autonomous, but on the basis that there are some principles understood, and in place for everybody. So this is a fine line to tread. Now, note carefully here that a teaching and learning policy is not statutory. So if you go off and publish one online or tell your inspectors this is how you do things here, you can expect to be held to account for that, in my view. So be careful. You want your hymn sheet, but maybe keep it for your CPD, keep it behind your scenes, and you work out what information you share, because you can see here this sentence goes against the school. And again, let me remind you, it's got strong standard in all areas, but the curriculum each in the weakest link. And I know there'll be other areas that have led to this evaluation, looking at curriculum plans, looking at how things are sequenced, and many other factors. But again, just looking at it here at a surface level. And then I'm going to finish with the very last one, the only report I could find of the latest publications that has a strong standard. Okay. Now, what it says here is staff training, or what we should now say is professional learning, is sharply focused on building expertise. So listen carefully to the language. This means that staff are skilled at meeting the precise needs of all pupils. Teachers are experts at teaching the curriculum. They do so in a highly effective manner to ensure that pupil learning is deep and knowledge is sustained over time. Teachers demonstrate an excellent understanding of how best to adapt learning when needed, including for pupils with special education needs or disabilities. So the language here, there's another word here at the top I didn't mention, sharp, ambitious, those kind of phrases. So it is glowing, but it's not an exceptional report, which is the highest rating. And if it's of interest, this particular report belongs to a secondary school that belongs to one of the largest multi-academy trusts in the country. So what I'd recommend here in this school, if I had the privilege to do so, is the question I'd ask the school leaders is, how can a school achieve an exceptional grade, or at least match? Let me just scroll back down here. Get this across the whole board. And I'd imagine other aspects of the inspection would require, all these other judgments to all kind of synchronize to get exceptional overall. And I suspect, like all past Ofsted and frameworks, it'd be a tiny percentage minority of schools that achieve that top standard all the time. Here we have an Ofsted framework in a new guise, probably replicating lots of the same things we've seen before. So we might want to dig deep into achievement and inclusion again, things like that. So, but if I knew all the answers, and I was living this day to day as a school leader, I could tell you a little bit more. But I thought I would just take a moment. Let me just go back to the top here. There's the blog. I just thought I'd go out my way, take an interest myself. How are the reports being published? What are they starting to say? For my own understanding more than anything. So I hope it helps. I hope the solutions also give you some things to think about. And again, I'm sure you have all the resources in your own schools and classrooms already. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on another broadcast soon. Bye for now.